Hey everyone, we're back. If you see the three of us here together, you know we're talking about an X-Men movie. That just seems to be what we talk about here on the LP Movie Club. And if you are counting, if you're keeping score at home during that intro there were three X-Men movies featured in there already, and we're going to talk about a fourth one. And it's everyone's favorite, right? X-Men: The Last Stand, the third X-Men.
The movie that finished the trilogy that we didn't want to continue.
And we have our title there that kind of looks like LP Movie Club, the movie club, the series, but we are talking about X-Men: The Last Stand. It's weird. Sorry, it's weird too that I feel like we're missing one member of our X crew here. We don't have Mike C, but I do have, still figuring this stuff out here. But Becca with me, and then Jeremiah down here, and we are let's get into this movie. Obviously, I was being sarcastic when I said that this is everyone's favorites of the X-Men movies. Before we rewatch this, because I think we had all seen this one before, correct? Mm-hmm. Becca, let's start with you. What did you remember about this movie, and how did you feel about it going into watching it again?
Definitely wasn't too psyched to watch this again, but I remember not liking the I don't know, edgier mutants, if you will. The goth, is that an okay term to use? Like, I remember not liking them, and I remember feeling that this was just the most disappointing of the original three X-Men movies. I'm trying to think. And I remember there's some like tension between Rogue and Iceman and Kitty Pryde, and I just didn't care for that storyline at all. Like, it did nothing for me. So those are a few of the things that jumped out at me that I was going to pay attention to this time.
Yeah, I actually had a note mixed into the middle of this here that it just said it's C story, Rogue is sad. That's kind of the background story happening throughout this movie. Jeremiah, what about you? What were your thoughts going back into this one?
I saw it in the theater, and I think that was the last time I saw it. I don't even remember if I bought it. Like, I was big on buying all the DVDs and Blu-rays of all these, but this one just it when the only thing that comes out of it is one line from what should be one of the best characters portrayed in the X-Men films, but he's downgraded to 10 minutes of screen time, and I'm talking about Juggernaut and who he is. And having to rewatch this, like, I signed up for this today because I forgot about it, and then I went, wait, which one's Last Stand? Oh, it's that one. And I really, really thought about taking my name off so I wouldn't have to watch it, but I did, and it's just as bad as before.
Yeah, let's start off with what I think is, the biggest problem with this franchise that we've talked about throughout all of these other movies has just been the inconsistency of their timelines and things that just don't line up. Like, for example, this movie opens with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen playing Charles Xavier and Magneto meeting a young Jean Grey, which is a scene that we've seen before, and yet they're McAvoy and Fassbender at that time, and so they're much younger. They've already had their conflicts, which doesn't seem to be the case here. It's all over the place right off the bat.
Well, yeah. And I know that, when they rebooted the series or the franchise, it was a little different, but would Charles have been walking at that point?
That was another point I was going to bring up too. Yeah, it's confusing in the comics. Like, he has the ability to just will himself to be able to walk. So theoretically, yeah, he could just do that whenever. But it's definitely inconsistent because we saw McAvoy get the injury that put him in the wheelchair and made him lose the ability to walk. And yet now here's Patrick Stewart walking. And don't get me wrong, I love Patrick Stewart, but looking no younger than he did in other previous X-Men movies. So
Come on, that was going to be my main point. That de-aging process they did for him really shows. Like, I look at it as like that doesn't even look like Doc Brown when he takes off the bad skin, so he looks a little younger. The opening, but I that whole scene, just like you said, Mac, is so played out in these movies that you do forget which movie it happened first, and then re-seeing it, and it's bad.
Yeah, you're right though, because it is kind of hard to keep track of, like, wait, does this make sense now, given what we saw in other movies, and given that those are prequels, but then they also changed the timeline, and it is kind of hard to keep track of things. But there's also just so many different things. For one example, being I think it's Secretary Trask, who is just a completely different person in Days of Future Past. So it's almost like they were looking at these things and saying, nobody's going to pay attention to the details. Don't worry about it. Nobody cares about that. And now looking at that now, that's so crazy to think, with all the little comic book details that Marvel throws into all of their projects. And I mean, look, we broke down the fact that maybe a fly was Mephisto, a literal fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And now they're here going back to what year was this movie came out? Like 2005, somewhere around there. 2006, yeah. So I mean, to just completely change a different character, like a character altogether, it's just so crazy to me.
Yeah, and then there's also so many characters, and I feel like nobody really, I mean, yeah, you had Magneto, of course, he was going to be a big part of the story. Same thing with Jean Grey, and of course with Wolverine, but you had all these other characters, and it was like, you really don't even get to see much of anybody's powers or anything that anyone gets to do, and it's just like, it felt so stuffed. And I'm thinking, okay, we had Endgame and Infinity War. Granted, you were building up to it, but like, that's jam-packed, and it felt like everybody, had a fair amount of screen time and had a fair role in the story.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Yeah, Jeremiah.
I want to ask one thing. This will definitely be more for you, Mac. Becca, I don't know if you'll be too familiar. So the Danger Room scene at the beginning, is it me, or is that the exact same set from Terminator 2 3D when they go into the future? Like, I was watching that, and it was dead on.
It's very possible. Now that I think about it, yeah, it looks a lot like it. I mean, they're fighting the Sentinels too, which it kind of goes in with the Terminator theme. Which I'm trying to remember back to the first X-Men and then X2. Was this the first sighting we had of the Sentinels? And even if it was just a simulation, that's very strange to me as well, that they would introduce that huge piece of X-Men lore in that way.
Well, do you think they were hoping this would launch more movies, and then the reception by the audiences were just like, no? Well,
it's funny, in researching a little bit about this movie after watching it today, I came across a quote where the director mentioned, that they wanted to treat this as a trilogy, and they wanted fans to know that it was a trilogy. So that tells me that they went into this movie thinking this is the end. There aren't going to be any more X-Men movies. And I do kind of get that vibe from some of the things they did, which, killing off some major characters, for example. So I kind of get that. And then they obviously launch into the prequels, which makes way more sense because of how this ended, and, gave them the opportunity to kind of fix everything. So, yeah, no, that I was interested to see that today, that they kind of had the thought of like, well, this is going to be the end of the X-Men movies. I did want to talk about, you mentioned, Becca, those characters that you were not such a fan of. They did really cram a lot of characters into this movie, which they kind of do with all of them, like X-Men and X2 leading up to this. Oh boy, hang on, got to point out this one.
Justin.
Oh.
Look, to each his own. I mean, you have your preferences. That's fine. They killed Cyclops in this movie. That's, I'll just say that. But they do.
Well, hold on. Wait, since you mentioned that, I want to point out one thing. Scott dies, Wolverine finds his glasses. Wolverine says one thing to Jean, and until the very end of the movie, when there's a tombstone, Scott is not mentioned again. There is nothing at all about this character. Much like Rogue disappearing, they're off screen. Nobody's going to care. Nobody will notice anything.
Right. Yeah. And this is the leader of the X-Men that was just killed in a matter of seconds and just kind of swept under the rug. Yeah, that was one of my biggest problems with this movie when I saw it for the first time. I'm not the biggest fan of Cyclops because nobody is a big fan of Cyclops, but to take a major character like that, and let's just get into it. That's the second biggest death of this movie. They kill Charles Xavier as well. Well, the post-credit scene changes that a little bit, but they kill off Charles Xavier, and that is the one to me that is like, okay, this is where they plan to end the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
And go on.
No, go ahead.
It's very interesting. We addressed this in some of our other ones where the Charles is dead, but then he just reappears later in Days of Future Past with no explanations. But it really was, why was that ever a plan? I mean, there is the whole scene of him talking to Storm about, when I go, I want you to take over. So it is hey, here's what could happen in the future. But even if they were like, okay, this is it, why kill him and then bring back in some other form in the post-credits? That just is confusing, to say the least, and bad planning, to say the most.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think the same thing with the cure, if you will. Like, they hint that it doesn't have a permanent effect. And it's like, okay, so then everybody who, like, we know Rogue took it, and we know that Mystique, she jumped in front of Magneto to spare him from getting hit by this thing, and then they totally didn't dismissed her. There was nothing more from her throughout the whole movie. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, so you're trying to end your series, but then also hinting that, oh, hey, these people who have lost their powers might not actually have lost their powers. Or was that just sheer force of will that?
Yeah, no, I definitely got that vibe that it ended up being like a temporary thing. And like Jeremiah said, with Charles Xavier inexplicably coming back in Days of Future Past, you get the same thing with Magneto. He's fully powered again by that point. So yeah, my understanding was that the effects of the cure wore off. It's funny you bring up Mystique too, because in the beginning of this movie, I immediately was cringing, just like, oh, they're just once again overusing all the same Mystique gags over and over again. How many times do we see somebody who is obviously not really them, and then like they flash the yellow eye or something, like, oh yeah, I knew it was Mystique. You didn't have to give me that. They make it very obvious over and over again. So I was kind of happy. I was relieved. I had kind of forgotten what her storyline was in this movie because understandably it's been a very long time since I watched it. And to see when she got the cure, the quote unquote cure, I was like, all right, good. We can do away with that, for the rest of this movie at least.
Yeah,
that's
true. Rebecca Romaine Stamos, or Rebecca Romaine, or whatever she's going for. Yeah. Seeing her back as Mystique, because I'm so used to, our current Mystique, I was like, oh, that's right. And she wasn't that great. I don't want to say that she was just the body and the acting wasn't the best, but I kind of feel that was more of the way it was going. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was definitely more of the, hey, we need somebody pretty, not somebody that can carry a storyline.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do agree with that as well. However, I will say the one thing that we've agreed with, in the previous movies, the one thing this franchise did well was casting. And the best thing we got out of this movie, I thought, maybe you guys might completely disagree with me here, but Kelsey Grammer as Beast was fantastic. I loved that casting job. I thought, that was just an awesome addition.
I just kept hearing Frasier, but yes, no,
Sure.
he was really good.
Well,
Yeah,
if you
he
go
does
back,
it very well.
yeah, if you go back and watch the X-Men animated series, hearing Beast talk, like I honestly compared him to Frasier in my head anyway. So I thought, that fit very well. The voice, the speech pattern, and everything was just like it was perfect. So there were some positives to come out of this movie, not many, but I think that was the biggest one for me, at least.
Yeah, that's true.
What about you guys? Was there anything that stood out as like something you actually enjoyed about I know, Jeremiah, you said Juggernaut, but anything else that really stood out as something you liked about this movie?
Juggernaut he doesn't come out as a good character. He should have been much better.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the whole, like Rebecca was saying, the goth mutants. That do we even learn names other than like one of them? I mean, and Porcupine Guy. Really, that's his whole power, is he can put out quills.
That's his name is Quill, actually. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad you said it that way.
Is it really? Because in the IMDb, he's listed as Kid Omega, I think.
That is, I saw that as well. That is actually a different character that apparently just appears in the background of a classroom at one moment, and that's it. So I'm not sure why he's even listed there, because Moira McTaggart, who was a different actress in this movie from the other ones as well, is uncredited. And yet this other one playing Kid Omega, who just, again, appeared in the background for a second, is apparently credited in there. So that is a little strange. But no, this was Quill, a very lame character, essentially a human porcupine.
And that actor, I think it's Ken Leung. He was in Inhumans. He's one of the with the royal family.
He's Karnak, isn't he?
Yes, and
wow.
he's on Lost. He's a lot better in, I think, seasons 4, 5, and 6 of Lost.
Yeah, no, that's going back to what I said about like the positives of this movie. The cast, for the most part, I thought was really, really great. Didn't have a whole lot to work with, but a lot of them did a great job. And one of them, I think, is actually Famke Janssen, who plays Jean Grey, aka the Phoenix. I thought she did a great job in this movie. I mean, she has a very strange role to play, and we can talk all day about how they butchered the character, but I thought she, as an actress, did a very good job.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that as my positive about this movie, is I was happy that she was back even in this role, because I was really disappointed. I mean, I thought X2 was a really good movie, and the way that ended, like, it all made sense for the story, but I was disappointed that it was like, oh, we don't have Jean Grey anymore. And yes, we do.
Right. And like I said, we could talk a lot about them butchering this character and this storyline. So we'll try to limit ourselves here, at least Jeremiah and myself. Dark Phoenix is one of, if not the most iconic X-Men storyline of all time. And it is relegated to a B story in this movie. And I'm really not sure what the thought process was there.
I don't even know if it's the B story in this. Like, Jean appears and she has more of the storyline, but she never gets any real screen time. She's always the background. She'll pop up at certain times. Even the finale with Logan and her, like, that is probably one of the worst endings, and that's hard to say, of any of the X-Men films, because it's just like, oh, she has the power to, essentially, her power is the Thanos snap. Like, she turns everybody to dust, and sorry, spoilers, she's dead because Wolverine just shoves the claws in her. That's it.
Yeah. It's strange. She is sort of this looming thing, in the background of this movie the whole time. It's like, they want to go after Magneto, but they can't, because Jean is on her side or on his side, and she has this immense power that they don't fully understand. But like you said, she barely gets any screen time, and she is just sort of in the background as Magneto does all the work, with the whole main storyline being about this cure and Magneto fighting, humanity, as he always is. and fighting off this the idea of a mutant cure. So strange that I mean, this is a story that has existed in X-Men comics and stuff like that, but not one that, there's not like this big story arc that stands out in everyone's mind like Dark Phoenix does, and yet they gave this one the top billing. And I thought that, I mean, just so strange, such a weird choice. That combined with Charles Xavier and Cyclops both being killed in this movie, I'm sure trying to remember back to 2006. I'm sure a lot of X-Men fans walked out of the theater just completely confused and very unhappy.
I mean,
this was so early on. With the post-credit scenes, like that wasn't something that we were all so used to at that point. So I'm sure that I stayed because I can remember being very annoyed with the Charles, and then just walking out and going, "That's it? Okay, sure." But yeah, the storyline as a whole, I think there's, as we've picked apart every other X-Men film, there's the point fail, and that if you look at it from not even the microscopic, but just the storyline as a whole, as a nerd, you go, this is all wrong.
Yeah, I mean, just one weird choice after another throughout this movie. I mean, some of the other characters they included too, like Callisto is a pretty, I wouldn't say major character, but as far as like the B level characters go in X-Men comics, she's a pretty major one, and she's probably the only one that they use well out of Magneto's whole other group. I mean, we already talked about Quill. There's some other just really bizarre choices to include. Leech plays a major role in this movie, and they kept the power set but changed the character drastically. Leech is a character that is saved by Callisto and lives with the Morlocks, these unwanted mutants, and yet here he is, this basically the center of this whole movie. Such just a weird choice to build the movie around this character, and just so many weird choices throughout this movie. I do want to talk about the bridge scene. And I wish we had Tony with us right now to kind of lay out geographically how the bridge being moved to Alcatraz would work. I don't know San Francisco well enough. I don't know if either of you do.
It would. That is actually one of the few things about that entire scene that works. I mean, the distance and the way he picks it up, it wouldn't be a quick turn.
Right, because it is a bridge, so yeah.
It would have to rotate to fill the space, and they do a great job of setting up. And I actually have photos from the side where the Asian tourists are having their picture taken. Like, I have that exact photo. So that is good. But why do you have to move an entire bridge for what should have been about 30 characters? And then I think by the end, I was kind of counting the second time I watched the fight to get this. There turns out to be like 150 mutants on that bridge, when at one point it was like that many.
Yeah.
Just float over a boat there, Magneto. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, you could have put them all on a school bus and gotten them over there, apparently. So.
Yeah.
Causing just no regard for San Francisco traffic at all. I want to back up too, just the fact that Warrington Labs is where they have this cure, where they develop the cure, and where they're offering it to mutants. And why would the hub of this new cure be on Alcatraz, the least accessible place in the country?
I was thinking the same thing. Like, that seems like a very, very bad idea, just all around. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that explains Magneto moving an entire bridge, I suppose. That's the whole reasoning for it. I do like that after they move the whole bridge, they show the woman in the car and she locks her door, and Magneto just kind of looks and like, really? You just watched me move the bridge that your car is on. I could just toss your whole car, but
that entire scene of the kid playing the Game Boy in the back seat, like, I don't understand the thought process behind these backup characters, the backgrounds, what needs to be put in. Oh, here's a happy family stuck in traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a kid playing a video game, and then it starts shaking. Oh no, it's an earthquake. And then Magneto with his 12, 13, 300 mutants come running on. That entire scene, and then so I watched it, then I went back and kind of rewatched the fight again to see how bad it really was. And then the most interesting thing is the people that are on the bridge that are still in their cars turn on their lights because when Magneto lifted the bridge, it was daytime. And then at night, when the fight is over, and then they show the background and there are lights on all the cars.
They wanted to see. They're like, this is like being at a movie theater, drive-in theater. You get to see the show, right? No. I thought the mom in the car might have been a mutant at some point. Yeah. I was like, oh, we're gonna see her like protect her family or do something to prove that, like, hey, I'm also a mutant. But no. She's locked her car. Wow.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring up the scene where, so this is the third movie. This is the third time the military has had to deal with Magneto. How many times are they going to keep coming at him with metal weapons?
Yeah.
And so then they really hammer home that scene where everyone is picking up their plastic weapons. They're like, absolutely no metal. Like, yeah, you think? You're hammering this home now when it should have been halfway through the first movie.
So my biggest question about that is, okay, they're shooting the cure, whatever.
Yeah.
What is the syringe made out of? Because every time they show it, it sure does look metal to me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I had the same thought because I was like, okay, he can't affect the guns, but couldn't he still just stop those syringes coming? Are they plastic? Does that even work that way? I'm not sure. Also, wouldn't you need to, push it in through the syringe? I'm not sure. I'm not a scientist. But.
Yeah, or maybe the tips are just all like a poison dart or something. Like they're just everything's right there in the tip, so that if it hits your shoulder or whatever, because everybody that gets hit with it, well, everybody, Magneto and Mystique, when they get hit with it, it affects them right away. Like. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good point. You're like, yes, if this is, or is it Angel? Is that his name?
Yes.
When I'm like, why? When he goes to, he's agreed with his father to get the cure. Why do they put him in these scary, huge syringes? Like, I mean, the thing was enormous. I'm like, you really need something that big for the cure? Whereas, Mystique gets hit with one little
right.
dart, and come on.
That was, I'm glad you brought that up too, because just another unnecessary story that they crammed into this is like this little, and it happens throughout like 3 or 4 scenes throughout the movie where, he refuses first we find out he's a mutant trying to cut off his wings. Then he refuses the cure, and then he saves his father in the end. And again, like, why did we need this? It's like they wanted to, they're like, oh, we have this other great character that people know and love. Let's throw him in there. And then they were like, oh, well, we didn't write anything for him. So real quick, let's just jot this down right before we shoot.
Yeah, why don't we throw the dad off the building, but he'll come and save the day?
Yeah. He doesn't get into the fight at all, but his dad, who was trying to cure him, he comes and saves. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of other little side stories, there's also this little thing between Wolverine and Storm about like trying to be the new leaders of the X-Men and debating on which way to do it. Like, it really only happens in the danger room in the very beginning, and then in the fight at the very end. And the one thing that got me was, they come together in the end, and Wolverine says, we do this as a team. And then his first order is, Bobby, go do this by yourself. Go fight Pyro by yourself, because we're working together as a team now. It kind of really killed any momentum they had going with that story.
Maybe Bobby's not really part of the team. He's like, we need somebody to take care of Pyro. No, but just go do that. the real fighters are going to focus here.
Right.
The part of that whole scene that stands out the most is when Storm, Beast, and Wolverine are all against the cars, and they look down and they see the packet of the cure, and they go from each of them 2 different times down to the cure and then back. And like there's a 5-minute segment of them just going, just yeah. Too much screen time for the cure.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That was the star of the show.
Yeah, I'm surprised that's not like the second or third billing on the IMDb page. But
the mutant cure.
I did want to talk a little bit about some of the deleted scenes for this movie, because for some reason some of them stood out in my mind. After I watched it, I went to the extras to see if they were on there, and unfortunately none of them are on Disney Plus right now, but you can find them on YouTube with just a little bit of digging. So a couple of them that I thought were really interesting and was kind of surprised that they cut them out. Right after Magneto moves the bridge and we see that woman lock the door, and Magneto and his whole group of 300 people move into their attack, Jean holds back for a second and she senses the girl in that car crying. And you can see that she's having this moment of like, am I doing the wrong thing here? And then there's another deleted scene where Magneto is telling Jean to get into the fight and help. And she's stopped and hesitates and she doesn't join in. And you see a bunch of Magneto's forces getting hit with the cure. And so I thought that was really interesting. I think taking those out kind of changes the dynamic of Jean's whole story in this. I thought, that would have made a lot more sense to see that sort of the humanity in her is battling with the Phoenix, as opposed to just she's kind of just there the whole time.
Yeah, and she's definitely just there during the fight. Like, here I am hovering behind you all. Like, I'm not going to do anything, even though, again, I have the most power and I can wipe this entire island off with one snap.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. I remember those scenes, so I must have bought the DVD when it came out. But yeah, they kind of hint on a little bit of the humanity coming back every now and then. But it really, by the third act, you forgot all about it. I mean, you almost forgot about Jean as a whole. But that scene where Wolverine's rushing, and Wolverine is fighting everything he can to get up to her, and bits and pieces of his costume are falling away as parts of his skin are falling away, but his costume doesn't disappear fully. Again, are we just trying to get Hugh Jackman shirtless? Is that the entire point of this story?
I'm surprised that doesn't happen, right? Like, that's their moneymaker. That's what they go to in every movie. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I think at one point you see bones. No, I didn't even realize, but you're right. Yeah, like the costume is still there. Like, come on.
Another deleted scene that they shot that I thought was interesting was an alternate ending with Rogue, where she didn't take the cure, where Bobby goes in and meets her and she says, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. And then they hold hands in the end, but she's wearing a glove again. So kind of funny that they just couldn't really decide which way to go with this character. It was almost like, well, we might do another movie with her in the future, but probably not. So let's just shoot both and then decide later.
They could have played it in theaters like Clue, and you could have had a different ending. Depending on what theater you went into.
Would have been a better movie.
Yes. That also, why does Rogue go back to the school? She's no longer a mutant. She just goes back to her room, hangs out, says, "Hey, Bobby, sorry, you want to hold hands now?"
Right. And then one last deleted scene. There is a version where Juggernaut breaks into the room chasing after Leech, and once he breaks through the wall, he says, "Here's Juggy." And so, if they had the opportunity to give him 2 viral lines in this movie, and they cut one of them.
When I was watching it, like, I hadn't watched this probably since 2006, maybe when the DVD came out. And at first I thought they cut out the line where I'm Juggernaut and then some other word. But when it was there, made me smile just how bad this really comes across.
I still loved it. I still laughed at it watching it all these years later. It was, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's over the top. It doesn't fit in the movie at all. It doesn't fit the character at all. But it was ridiculous. So I loved it for what it was worth.
I liked how he kept saying, "Do you know?" or something about like, "Do you know who I am?" or something like that too, which I thought was funny as well. Like, okay, come on.
Like, no, because why would we?
Right.
And why exactly would they? Hold on, I completely forgot one of the biggest annoyances: the mobile prison that they can never escape from because it's always on the move.
Yeah, but it's always made of metal. So,
and why does he have his helmet on in this giant prison sandwich that he's stuck in to keep his face pretty? Really?
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Want to catch up on a few comments here. We've been so just into this conversation and I haven't really paid attention to the comments here, but thank you, Kyle. This week's Mystique, as opposed to this week's Scroll on That's Plug. What did you guys think of Kelsey Grammer's Beast? We talked about that a little bit. I loved it. The casting was fantastic. And honestly, surprising that it took them this long to get Beast into the franchise as well. And then, does this have any connection to Dark Phoenix? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know anymore. It's too hard to keep track of. I guess no. This whole movie was technically erased by Days of Future Past. So really, we've just spent the last 37 minutes talking about a movie that doesn't exist. So there you go.
I do like Kyle's final comment when we were saying how The Cure should be second billing, and he said Barbara Smith.
Any other thoughts on this movie, negative or positive? Do we have any other positive thoughts to throw out there?
Rebecca?
Not necessarily about the movie, but it is fun to see Kevin Feige's name come up in this and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Before you got to run Marvel, you had to do stuff like this.
Oh, I have a positive, and this is something I sent Kyle. I sent Mac a message about. The opening Marvel is a new comic, and it's all X-Men. Yeah. That was really nice, and really, I don't know why I even paid attention to it because I'm so used to those now. It just kind of background noise, but I was like, oh, that's some good art, and I didn't realize it was the first time that it's appeared on Disney Plus so far that we know of.
Yeah, I actually you, Jeremiah.
I actually
the same thing as everybody else.
I was gonna say that before we left. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, there it is. That is everyone's burning question. That is our. I have a bad feeling about this. Everybody has to bring that up at some point.
It's our barely an inconvenience. So super easy, barely an inconvenience.
I forget what we were just talking about right before that. So
it's called X-Men Last Stand, and we'll forget about it in about 10 minutes when we sign up.
A fair point. Oh, the scroll. Yeah, there is some really great new art in that scroll, and I went back to Days of Future Past, and that still has the old scroll, and I would assume the other X-Men movies do as well. So it was strange. That, once you pointed it out to me, because like you said, I didn't notice it at the first time because it's just background noise to me at this point. But it's some really cool art. So check that out if you're going to watch this on Disney Plus.
Or just check that out and don't watch the rest.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe that's the way to go. Check out the opening scroll and then switch over to Days of Future Past and watch that one instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which brings me to my final question here. Actually, is this the worst of the X-Men franchise? I'll start. Yes, this is my least favorite, and that was my thought going into this. And actually, now I am still kind of debating because the Wolverine is also one that I really don't like, but I think that edges this one out by just a little bit. Becca, what do you think? Do you have a different one that you dislike more than this one?
When you say the Wolverine, do you mean the 2013 one or the Origins?
Yeah, no, the 2013 one, the the sequel to the prequel, I guess.
Okay. I don't like the Origins movie. But yeah, and I haven't seen Dark Phoenix, so I can't comment on that. I know you guys are both disappointed with that one as well. But I mean, this I think is probably my least favorite of the X-Men movies that I've seen. Just the one, maybe Origins, I don't know. Both of those are very much tied for me, like movies I don't necessarily want to watch again.
See, for me, Origins definitely is a poor movie, but I feel like the bits and pieces of it, it doesn't take itself as seriously as this movie did, and that's why this movie is the worst. This was the third film. This was the Return of the Jedi for the X-Men trilogy, and they gave us an entire film of Ewoks, not any good battles. And really, the end of it, how does it end? Oh, Beast shoves the cure in Magneto, and then there are certain scenes that you need to watch, and then you need to look at it again. Watch Beast after he sticks the cure in Magneto, because he has this look like, what did I just do? And then he throws the cartridge away and just disappears into the background. It's like, people, come on.
His heart wasn't in it.
Yeah.
And I guess Origins did give us Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which
or as Wade.
I won't spoil it, Becca, because I know you haven't seen Deadpool 2 yet, but
oh, you haven't?
Things get changed a little bit. So
Okay.
But yeah, no, Jeremiah, I totally agree with what you said, that I know Origins is the one that, like, that's sort of the default. But I think that movie is just so ridiculous and crazy and over the top and doesn't take itself seriously. And I think it's fun almost. And I'm looking forward to rewatching it for a movie club coming up pretty soon. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that too. But yeah, this one just, I don't know, the whole thing kind of feels like a downer in every possible way. Like they let us down as comic book fans. It's all just very like grim, and they kill a bunch of characters, and yeah, just not my favorite. Could say quite the opposite. And also, Becca, you mentioned that Dark Phoenix was disappointing. I don't know that I actually was disappointed by Dark Phoenix, just because I knew going in that it was going to be terrible. And everybody had said this movie is terrible, and fully expected it to be the case. And we knew at that time too that this was the end of the X-Men franchise. So I went in with lower expectations, and it would actually say that I enjoyed that movie more than this one, and some of the others as well.
Okay.
But it wasn't. New Mutants, that still came out maybe 5 years afterwards. But
yeah, and I will say I enjoyed New Mutants. That was a ridiculous movie as well that doesn't quite take itself so seriously. And yeah, I liked it for what it was worth.
If the mutants came to the MCU, would you... Jeremiah, I think you're still reading the comics. Do you guys like the Krakoa storyline and those characters? Would you want to see them in the MCU, or?
Matthew, go ahead.
Okay, so I love Krakoa. I would love to see Krakoa in the MCU. I don't know that I necessarily want the stories that have stemmed out of it in the MCU. It's gotten very, very complicated, and there's a lot going on. But Krakoa, I think, would be very similar to like Pandora, and I think I could see people getting attached to that sort of world. So yeah, I think that would be great. I just would like to see them do some different stories. Honestly, I'd like to see them do classic X-Men stories, and do them right, and work their way up to Krakoa. So hopefully that's what we get.
I would rather see them, however Kevin has in his head to bring the mutants in. I'm really hoping. I'm one of the few that would like to see somehow the mutants that we're used to carried into the MCU in some random form, because starting anew is just going to screw everything up. But if they do start anew, I would rather see them start classic X-Men storylines, introduce the Sentinels, and the stuff that the X-Men could bring in, especially if you get the X-Men and the Fantastic Four going at the same time. you get the scrolls in there, you get the everybody fighting. You know, your Secret Wars could be a massive thing. I know it's not going to be a massive thing. It's going to be a Disney Plus series, but still, 6 hours will be entertaining no matter what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much on the Marvel slate coming up pretty soon, and supposedly the thought is out there that we only know a portion of it. So I mean, there's still a lot more to be added to it, and I can't wait to see what that means for mutants, and like Jeremiah said, the Fantastic Four as well, and what their involvement will be. Couldn't even really begin to guess, to be honest, but definitely looking forward to it. Any other closing thoughts on X-Men: The Last Stand before we wrap up here?
Hey, Rebecca?
Yeah?
You know what happens when a toad gets struck by lightning?
You stole my thunder. I'm going to guess the same thing that happens to everybody else. Everything else?
We need that just scene. Every one of these, we just need to end. That needs to be our finale scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So Movie Club will be back next week. We'll be talking about Tinkerbell and the Legend of the Never Beast. And I'm just laughing at the transition from this to that. I would imagine that is a much better movie than the one we just talked about. So come back next week for that. For more Marvel stuff, I will be back on Marvel Time on Wednesday this week. I know, Becca, you have Barely Necessities. Mm-hmm. Jeremiah, when are we going to see you again? When are you getting on another water ride sometime soon?
I believe Wednesday I will be at Epcot doing a walk and talk. Thankfully, there's no water rides, but I will be checking out the calligraphy, apparently, that's going on, a calligraphy class. This is the stuff our CEO has me do.
Well, I am actually very interested in seeing how that goes over at Epcot and seeing your finished work at the end of that too. So, but yeah, that's going to do it for us on LP Movie Club. Thank you everyone for listening to our conversation on this ridiculous movie. And like I said too, we will be doing X-Men Origins Wolverine in just a few weeks. Actually, it's the Tinkerbell next week, Cruella the week after that. So, I'm getting excited for some new content.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. And then we'll be back with our X crew to talk about X-Men Origins Wolverine. So we will see you all then. Bye, everyone.